And hi again. Um, to whoever is watching these videos, welcome back. Uh, I want to take a little bit of step back because the type of videos that I've been doing have been going into whole scripts and results that I've been getting from the modeling. So today I'll take a different approach, a more theoretical one, because I think I need to do um, pause and like refresh or not a refresh, but explaining a couple things that are going on here. So to recap what's going on, is this whole series about how to create a map that can identify areas, priority areas for a set of species, um, and work on their management or conservation. The words that are usually used here is like biodiversity conservation, but um, that can be expanded into more kind of uses, right? So what what we've been doing right now, it's going a little bit into the whole how to select certain things, how, for example, how to select environmental information or climatic information and use it for modeling of the distribution of the species or the environmental suitability areas for the given species. In this exercise, what I've been going through is using an old methodology that I did some years ago for 10 amphibians, right? This is just because I want this to go faster, because this is kind of a long process in terms of it requires time for the in this case this old crappy computer to do the whole thing, right? So yeah, so this is basically what has happened, and I explained a little bit of the scripts. We are working with R language, um, and the last thing, the last thing that I have shown were the products of the projection. So basically, the final maps of the distribution or suitability areas for the 10 species of interest. This has been this was made for in 3 time periods: past for 1979, current for 2010, and I know it's not current, but those were the variables that I had over there. But those things can always be updated, right? And future scenario, worst case future scenario for 2030. And I repeat, this environmental information can be updated depending on the sources that what we are acquiring that. And what I wanted to show this time, it's basically basically what I just said, right? So this is a five-step process, right? And so far we actually have done the second and the third step, right? I went into detail in all of that, yada yada. And we are about to go into the prioritization, right? Which is a relatively easy process in terms of click, put options, set up options, and that kind of stuff, right? And after that, we will do what is called a gap analysis. The gap analysis is basically comparing the natural protected areas that exist in our zone of interest, and compared to our prioritization. I'll maybe talk a little bit in a second. But I really noticed that I missed talk a little bit of the species. How were they selected? And I think this is a very important part, because if you're going to work on something like this, and by this I mean species can be animals, can be plants. I think this has been done for marine biodiversity, but actually, in terms of the strict theory, I do believe this can also be applied for any other area that requires the location of something and understanding how spatially distributes itself. The first thing that comes to my mind is geomarketing, but maybe I am wrong. But this is how I see it, because in the end, it's subject that works around the variable, environmental variables, right? So that can be changed. But anyway, so let's go ahead and get into the whole thing. So the way the species were selected back in the first time I did this were three major blocks, right? Were they endemic or not? If for some reason there's someone that doesn't watch this and doesn't know what endemic means, is like you can find it exclusively in a very restricted area. This is one of the reasons why I decided to go with the amphibians, because they have a very limited, usually they have limited distributions, because they are pretty strict and sensitive to climatic changes. The other aspect was the conservation status, which is three main lists, two internationals, which is the CITES, which dedicates itself in terms of the market. How are they managed? Are they sold internationally? Can you sell them internationally and that kind of stuff? And the red list, which I think is very well known, right? Is this international compendium of things that tells us, is this in decline, critically endangered, blah, 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 etc., etc. But also we took in consideration a national. For the national, that is called Norma Mexicana Semarnat. So 0059. So that's the one that presents this evaluation of all the important species and sets them in a given category, right? And lastly, we went for some aspects of the biology. Here it was a little bit tricky. I am leaving a couple of these characteristics because I try to include them, but they're not well considered in the end. I will explain what do I mean by that, because in the end, I'll explain it right now. So technically, we need to feed, when we're going to do the prioritization, we need to feed them in a hierarchy. We need to create a hierarchy among our biodiversity, like why are they important? And that creates a weight of importance, right? Because in a way, we are trying to also preserve or pay attention to the species who are the most important. Okay. Is it changing? Okay, yeah, sorry, no, I didn't want to change. So for biology aspects, here is like the trophic level. I'll show a table in a moment. Hopefully I have enough time. Maybe I have to split this part into. So the trophic level, the carnivores, omnivores, and so on and so on, right? And we set up kind of like we assume an importance on that. That can be actually controversial. These are the points where your study can differ from what I am doing right now. We just need to have certain assumptions, right? Continental distribution. This goes a little bit into the endemic, right? Can we find it in the country, in the full continent? This is one of the things that were excluded, right? While it can be an important aspect, we were working with so many species that it was irrelevant, right? This is another one that was omitted, the global growth trend. Are they in decline? Are they in prosperity? Actually, this data, I think, comes from was reported in the national list. And we even tried to have this value for, is this a small, medium, or large animal? So once we select them, the whole occurrences, the points and locations were acquired from either scientific collections, which were between the scientific collections and online databases, were the most prevalent um, um, collection of data that we had, right? Yes, we corroborate with some papers, and even protected natural areas decreased, but those were like not specific, because we were looking for specific coordinates. And online databases, especially the GBIF, those are correct. But it is also important we keep going into the local data collections, for, like in this case, scientific collection, right? Because sometimes research institutions forget to publish this kind of stuff, or they don't have the habit. So that's basically everything that the way that the species were treated. Now let me just show you. This was technically, please do not pay attention to any of this, right? Right now, let me just black this out, right? So this is actually the original 94 species. This is a huge file that we needed to do, because we were testing, like, can we evaluate for this? Can we evaluate for that? So what we did is, parting from categories, we create numerical information, right? For example, for cities, was something like that. You have the category 1, 2, 3, and you have the combination of 1 and 2. So this is how it looked like, right? I know this is in Spanish, but this is how it was separated, right? Is it endemic? Is it only Nearctic? For those who don't know, there's this ecoregional division between that happens at the area from the Mexico state, so at the middle of Mexico, where you separate from the north into Nearctic and the south Neotropical. That's a kind of well known thing. Or is it cosmopolitan, which is, you can find it everywhere, right? And the other one that I want to go is like carnivorous. It was like the highest one is a 10. If it's mixed, so carnivorous, or if it's insects, 8. If only it's insect, it's 6, and so on and so on. So keep in mind that these numeric values are kind of arbitrary. So here's where you can put you can make all the effort to better argument here, right? Here, if especially you are doing this during a master's or something like that, you have a limited time, so you're trying to juggling your whole data or the information that you can acquire. Usually a lot of research projects are coming from a very nice intention, but we are unable to actually create the full fundament of what we are trying to do, right? But this is basically what we end up working with, yeah. And yeah, so in the end, oh well, okay. So I missed one thing, which is pretty important. Another factor that made us to how to select the species were the amount of records that we were able to collect from the online databases and scientific methods, because this is more a technical issue, right? Because we needed to have at least 10 occurrences. Yeah, at least that's what the literature still recommends. So yeah, so this is mostly about the theory behind how were they selected, and I think I'm gonna leave it over here. And then in the next video, I will go ahead on the prioritization principle, right? On the theory of the prioritization. And all this information that I'm talking about will make even more sense, because we needed to have this information and that, and those numbers to use, so we can use them in during the prioritization process. Okay, so until the next one, I'll be seeing you, and yeah. So thank you for being around, and have a good one.